your blood runs orange and blue. This is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart. Let's get to it, New York.
And after 26 years, destiny finally awaits the New York Knicks. What's up? This is EJ Stewart. You are listening and watching Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast that has now become an NBA Finals podcast because the Knicks are in the NBA Finals, and this is a very special show because this is going to be our NBA Finals preview, and we are going to break everything down of how the Knicks can attack this San Antonio Spurs team, the team that came out of the West, the Western Conference champions after beating the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'm excited to do this show because we got plenty to discuss, man. We're going to talk everything in terms of what the Spurs did to get to this point, the strengths of this team, the challenges that they caused all teams, including the Knicks. We'll also break down a little bit of what we saw in the three matchups these teams faced off against each other in the regular season, which I think is always very important when you're trying to glean what to expect from an NBA playoff matchup, especially an NBA Finals matchup. And, of course, we'll get you the keys to a Knicks win because, of course, that's what you want to hear, right, is how can the Knicks pull this off? And I'll give you my official prediction of how I think this series will go. I'm very excited to do this episode. Again, 26 years in the making. In many ways, this will feel very nostalgic for Knicks fans and Spurs fans and a lot of NBA fans because you will have not just an NBA Cup final rematch, first time ever that's happening in NBA history, though, of course, it's only been 3 years, right, of the NBA Cup. But you're also having a rematch of the 1999 NBA Finals, of course, during the lockout-shortened season when the Spurs knocked off the 8th-seeded Knicks to win the franchise's first NBA title. So this, in many ways, is as good a matchup as you can get in the NBA Finals, regardless of whether you're a Knicks fan or Spurs fan, just as an NBA fan. You got a megastar in Wembanyama, an exciting young team out west. You have a starred fan base in the Eastern Conference, a group of players in the Knicks that have now become very household names because they've been in these playoffs for a long time. And an amazing story, right, is can the Knicks break this now? We're talking about 53-year drought that they've had in terms of winning an NBA championship. All the pressure, all the narratives, all the discourse, everything's been open in terms of how people wanted to talk about this series, and I think this series will in many ways live up to the hype. I cannot wait to see these games start up, which again will begin on Wednesday night with Game 1 starting in San Antonio. Knicks traveling to San Antonio. They're actually already there now if you're recording this episode. If you're listening to this episode when I recorded it, they have arrived in San Antonio already, and they're getting ready for Game 1. So this is going to be an awesome series. Again, I think this is going to be an awesome episode of Orange and Blue Bloods, so I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. Of course, if you enjoy these episodes of Orange and Blue Bloods, there's multiple ways to support your boy. If you're listening or watching, regardless of whether you're listening or watching, number one way is, of course, subscribe to the podcast. So search Orange and Blue Bloods wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also hit the auto download feature, and if you can, give us a 5-star review. Even a written review also would help us. All those things are important, and we greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy watching the show, if you enjoy seeing your boy talk about the Knicks in this fly Knicks shirt with a bunch of graphics up on the screen, then be sure to check out our YouTube channel. New Generation Media is where all the episodes of Orange and Blue Bloods live from a video standpoint. And while you're there, subscribe to the channel New Generation Media on YouTube, NU Generation Media on YouTube, and be sure to, of course, make sure you like this video. Give me a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this series. Let me know what your prediction is for this series. I would love to hear it, and I will be responding to those who give me predictions. So definitely want to hear what you guys say about this NBA Finals matchup between the Spurs and the Knicks, which again will kick off and take place Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is, in many ways, a matchup that is surprising to some, maybe just because of the Spurs' youth and expectations coming into the season, and the fact that despite all the conversations about inexperience and them not being here, they were able to knock off the defending NBA champions to get here. So the Spurs, this is now them advancing to their first finals appearance since 2014. They did so by defeating the Oklahoma City Thunder in a Game 7. Phenomenal season for San Antonio so far. They won 62 games in the regular season. They are led by a 7'4" alien / phenom in Victor Wembanyama, who won Defensive Player of the Year. He finished third in MVP voting. So in many ways, when you talk about the Spurs and what they do well and what the challenges that face the Knicks coming up in the series, every conversation starts and ends with Wembanyama. He is legit. He is him. He is the generational player that was promised when he was coming up through the European ranks and then eventually drafted number 1 overall in the NBA draft. He's a matchup nightmare. He is 7'4", with a legit shot, with pretty much unlimited range. His size allows him to shoot over pretty much anybody, and he has a great handle. So he has these guard skills of shooting and ball handling and passing. Then you combine that with all the natural traits you would expect from a guy who's 7'4". So you want to talk about the rim running threat. You want to talk about the lob threat he is offensively. All those things are things he does at an elite level. So he's great in pick and roll. He's great as a run runner. He's, again, an absolute terror to deal with offensively. Defensively, again, predictably, as a 7'4" guy, he's also a terror. He's the best rim protector in the NBA. He makes blocks that no other guy can make. He alters shots that no other guys can alter. He's also great on switches, so he's not like an immobile big. He's very athletic. He's very good on his feet. He's very versatile. And the Spurs as a team, in terms of how they play defensively, they do a really good job of funneling everything towards him. So you could feel like, hey, we'll keep him out of actions, and that'll be our way to have an advantage against the Spurs. But in many ways, they'll almost Jedi mind trick you into finding a way to find Victor in actions where he can make impacts defensively. So he's legit. He's a great player, and he's going to be obviously one of the major focus points of this series. But I think when you talk about the Knicks and what they have coming up in this series, I think equally important to stopping Victor Wembanyama is going to be containing the Spurs guards. They have a 3-headed monster at the guard spot. You have De'Aaron Fox, multiple-time All-Star, Stephon Castle, former number 3 pick in the draft, and then you got Dylan Harper, who was the number 2 pick in this previous NBA draft just last year. And combined, they create an elite downhill attack. Any one of those guards can go off for big games and cause major damage, given the situation. So you may feel in a situation where you're like, oh, well, we got Fox contained. All right, we're all good. Well, as we've seen Oklahoma City learn the hard way, that doesn't mean that Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle can't hurt you. Or you can say, all right, Harper's been killing teams off the bench. We found a way to kind of limit him in this game. Well, again, that doesn't mean that De'Aaron Fox or Castle can't have big games. They're a legit tough handle. And I think what also makes them difficult is their size. Fox is 6'3", which is very good at the point guard position. But then you got elite size with the other two guys. Stephon Castle stands at 6'6". Dylan Harper stands at 6'5". So both, I think, do a great job of using their size and strength to their advantage. And when you're looking at all three, they each have varying degrees of lightning quickness and great finishing ability. So as great as Victor Wembanyama is, the 3-headed monster they have at guard also very key to their attack. Also key to their attack, obviously, like any NBA team pretty much, is the 3-point shot. And while this is basically a league average shooting team, if you think about like how many makes they have per game, their percentages, they're around between 12 and like 14. So they're like average to above average as a 3-point shooting team overall. But I think what's important to note about the Spurs in terms of their 3-point attack is they generate great looks because of A, the attention that Wembanyama demands, oftentimes requiring double teams, and B, again, the downhill ability of their guards able to get into the paint, which allows them to spray it out for really great looks for a guy like Julian Champagnie, who had a great season. He was awesome in Game 7 after kind of being a little bit of a shooting slump for a lot of that series. He was really hot and cold. In Game 7, he made 6 threes. Some of them were huge in the second half that allowed the Spurs to win that game on the road in OKC. And for Knicks fans, he'll be very notable for those that paid attention during the regular season, because he actually set an NBA record in the NBA season in the regular season matchup with the Knicks that happened on New Year's Eve. He had 11 threes against the Knicks, which was the most points scored, which was 36, by any player to not make a 2-point field goal. He was 11 for 17, I believe it was, from 3. He is somebody that when he gets going, he absolutely can get hot, and he can rattle a bunch off in a row. He is a legitimately very, very good 3-point shooter. And again, he hurt the Knicks this season. He's hurt the Knicks in previous matchups throughout his career. And then Devin Vassell is also a knockdown shooter. He's hitting 38% from 3 on high volume. So, again, not like they have the most sophisticated three-point attack. It's not like you're talking about Kyle Korver's out here, but they do have very capable three-point shooters and guys who typically will get very good looks from 3. So that is something that's going to be obviously very important to the Knicks in terms of trying to both contain Wemby and the guards while also trying to guard three-point line. I also want to talk about Keldon Johnson, who in many ways I think is their X factor when I look at this team. He is somebody who the numbers may not jump right out at you in terms of what he's done in the regular season, but he was a sixth man of the year. He's a highly efficient scorer, and he is someone whose role has really shifted. This was a guy who was at one point the star of the team. He was averaging 22 points a game. He was playing for Team USA, and he's taking a lesser role, and he wrote a really good Players Tribune article about him accepting that role and how he didn't really like it at first, but then he's really grown to be a team guy, understanding this was the best route for the team to reach its highest potential, which, as we see, at minimum, is to make the NBA Finals. And he had a great, very efficient season. He averaged 13 points. He shot 51% from the field. Averaging 13 points on 9 shots is extremely highly efficient in just 23 minutes a game. And now he's been very meh in the playoffs. Like, you look at his number, I think he has about 8 points, shooting about 41% or so from the field. In many ways, Dylan Harper has kind of taken on the mantle of the number one scorer off the bench. But I still think he is somebody that could be an X factor in this series and maybe be a forgotten man, in part because so much of the playoff conversation has been away from him. I think if the Spurs want to win this series, I think you need to see Keldon Johnson have a much better series, and we'll talk about why in a little bit when we talk about the keys to the series for the Knicks. And I think for the Knicks, I think if they want to win this series, I don't think they want Keldon Johnson, turning back into the sixth man of the year or the highly efficient scorer he's been throughout much of his career. I think you want to keep him probably where his average has been at, which is about 8 and 40% field goal percentage. So Keldon Johnson, in many ways, the X factor for the Spurs. He's been their X factor all season. And finally, at the end of the day, when you look at the Spurs, this is an elite team on both sides of the ball. They finished 4th in offensive rating this year. They were 3rd in defensive rating. And it's really not surprising given the high level of two-way players they have on this team, right? Wemby, of course, generational on both sides of the ball. Castle is one of the team's and one of the league's best perimeter defenders. Devin Vassell is also a really good two-way player. And they really don't possess many bad defenders. There isn't really a guy out there that you would say, oh, let's go hunt this guy. I guess if I had to pick, maybe Harrison Barnes. But he's not really bad. I just think he's old. No disrespect to Harrison Barnes, who's been a good defender in the NBA. But it really isn't a guy that really hunt. Harper is young, but again, I mentioned he's really strong. He's very athletic. He's pesky. He does a really good job putting ball pressure, and he can pick you up 94 feet. Fox and Champagnie, I would describe as fine defensively. I wouldn't consider them stoppers per se, but they're definitely not in any way guys who are liabilities at all. And Cornette is, of course, the backup 5, former New York Knick. Knicks fans will be familiar because we saw a lot of him in the Eastern Conference semifinals last year against the Celtics. He's a rim protector. He may have saved the Spurs season with the block of the year when he chased down Isaiah Hartenstein and blocked the dunk at the rim, pinning him on the glass, and it pretty much turned Game 7 for the Spurs in a major way. So, anybody looking at this series and saying, oh, the Knicks should just blow this team out, this is a very worthy challenger. This is a very good team the Knicks are playing, and they've absolutely earned their right to be here. So, in talking about this series, I really want to kind of go through some of the tidbits I got to explore when I watched the regular season matchups. I think that you always take this stuff with a grain of salt, and you definitely have to a little bit with these two teams particularly, because they played 3 very interesting games, very entertaining games, but all had weird things going on in almost all of them. So they played in the NBA Cup, where you had Victor Wembanyama, who was on a minutes restriction. The Knicks didn't have Deuce McBride or Landry Shamet playing in those games, and I think both guys will be important. In fact, Deuce did not play in either of the Knicks wins, both in the NBA Cup in December and in the March game. Also, the Knicks only lost to the Spurs, a game in which they blew a 19-point lead in the second half. Or maybe it was the first, I don't remember, but it was a 19-point lead. That was the highest I think it was first half, but the highest lead they had was 19 at one point in that game. In that game, the Knicks did not have Mitchell Robinson and did not have Josh Hart. So, again, you take these with a grain of salt, but I do think it's important to at least give you my takeaways from having watched those games, because I do think it's important to kind of try to glean something out of how these teams will prepare for each other when you get to now these NBA finals. So, I think the first big question I think everybody would have, at least I have, is who actually guards Wemby on the Knicks? It's actually funny. Shout out to my guy, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. Shout out to my guy, Zach Gelb, the Zach Gelb Show, 365 Sports. And now he's doing amazing things with local radio stations in Miami, local radio stations in Boston, and now, and of course, you'll remember him as the evening and afternoon host on Infinity Sports Network and CBS Sports Radio. We were kind of talking about like trying to remember everything that happened over the course of those games, because they happened so long ago at this point in time, especially the NBA Cup game, which was the first game these teams played all year. And I actually, when I was watching the games, was like curious, how did Knicks guard Wembanyama in these games? It's a little weird because, again, it's hard to get a straightforward answer. There was a game where there was a minutes restriction, so Wemby came off the bench. In that game, Mitchell Robinson took him the most. There was also a game where Mitchell Robinson didn't play at all. Obviously, that was the second game. So which actually is important to note, honestly, because one of the things we haven't gotten to talk about, I didn't get to do. I was out of town, so I didn't get to do a podcast through all the hoopla that may still exist. We'll learn more later today when the Knicks do. I'm recording this Tuesday afternoon when the Knicks do their media availability about Mitchell Robinson's broken pinky that we learned about, an injury that happened in a non-basketball way. They say he's going to try to play. There's hope he's going to try to play. They seem to be couching it, being careful, but I've not seen anything saying that like they don't think he can play. The only thing we're hearing from Mike Brown has been like he has to be cleared by medical in order to get out there. So I guess that's the last hurdle he has. I know he's been doing individual work. He hasn't necessarily been doing teamwork or scrimmaging in any way. So that's going to be an important story to follow throughout this entire postseason and see how effective he is. But, and again, in the game that they lost, Mitch didn't play. In that game, there was a lot more OG Anunoby guarding Wemby than any of the other two matchups. OG started on him in the December loss and took him most of the way. Cat and Hukporti ended up getting the secondary assignments when OG sat. In the games that Mitch played, it was basically Mitch, whenever he was on the floor, was guarding Wembanyama. It didn't matter. It was Cat, in which they did do some double bigs in the two games they played, or if it was OG or anybody else out there. It was always Mitch's matchup. They sprinkled in then OG and Cat as secondary assignments for Wembanyama in those games. Wembanyama's been playing much more minutes in the regular season than the postseason. So it was very easy to match Mitch's minutes. Definitely, obviously, in the Cup game, and even a little bit in the regular season because he wasn't playing up to 40 minutes, which he may play in this upcoming series. I think in terms of how the Knicks will approach this, I actually don't know how I'm not like sold on how they'll do it. My guess is they'll start with OG on him, but they've done weird things with OG. They also have put OG, and I watched some of the games as well, or especially earlier in the NBA Cup game, they actually put OG on Fox. So they also could do that. I think given how effective Bridges and Hart have been guarding on the perimeter, I think Mike Brown will have a little more faith in his backcourt, if you kind of count Josh Hart as part of a 3-guard lineup, to guard these guys on the perimeter than maybe he did in the regular season. So I think OG starts on Wemby. Then they go to Mitch. And as the game progresses, and then matchups change and things happen throughout the game, I think you'll see Cat probably more as the game moves on. But that's going to be key stretches when that happens, because obviously Cat can't get in foul trouble. He's extremely important in this series because for the Knicks to win, we'll talk about everything they got to do to win, but I think important for them to win, they got to play a lot of 5-out, or at least have a 5-out threat when we get to Josh Hart's impact in the series, which we're about to get to in a second. So Cat can't get in foul trouble. He got in foul trouble in the second game they played this year, the New Year's Eve game. He fouled out despite being impactful offensively. So that is going to be very key. I thought OG, when he guarded Wemby at times, was able to be very physical. Was able to be very disruptive. He, of course, is the shortest of the matchups the Knicks have, so Wemby does have potential opportunities to shoot over him. I'll be very curious to see how effective he is. But there's a chance that the Knicks may not employ as much OG Anunoby on him as maybe other people are expecting, because really it was only the game where they did not have Mitchell Robinson that OG took him a ton. And I think what will likely happen is Mitchell Robinson will play his 20 minutes a night if he's healthy. And in all those minutes, they will try to make sure he's on the floor with Wembanyama. And that is where you're going to see him really kind of make his bones. That's going to be the primary match point off the bench. And I think the OG cat thing, they're probably trying to trade off, to be honest, in figuring that out. Now, if Wemby's going in a certain way, or if he's really got cat in a bind, I think that's where you'll certainly see OG playing him. But who guards Wemby, I think is going to be an important question that I don't think, given watching the 3 games, I had a clear answer on. Only in that Mitchell Robinson will guard him when he's on the court. That's the only thing that was definitely definite. Everything else was a little more flexible. There were times where they put long stretches of OG on him. There were times they had long stretches of cat on him. So that's going to be an important thing to follow in this series when I think about what happened in the regular season. Also, I think is Josh Hart's impact in this series. Just thinking about watching these regular season games. For the Knicks, I think this series resembles the Cleveland series more than any of the other series they played so far in this postseason. Now, let me be clear. The Spurs are, I cannot say this, emphasize this enough, much better defensively on the perimeter than the Cavs. Much better. You have a team that has Donovan Mitchell and James Harden on the perimeter. Defensively, you have a lot of problems. The Spurs do not have anybody that plays on the level of Donovan Mitchell or James Harden defensively. Definitely not James Harden. And Mitchell's not a great defender. He can give effort and be disruptive, but I think that you would definitely say anybody that the Spurs play in any regular way on the perimeter, they guard better than Donovan Mitchell. And they're all taller than him. So let's put that aside. I still think this is very similar, or at least most similar, or most resembles the Cavs series, because the strategy I think will be kind of the same, which is to make these Josh Hart games. They're going to put Wemby on Josh Hart. That was something that was consistent throughout these games when Josh Hart played. And the goal is going to be let him roam, right? One of the reasons why the Spurs had so much success against the Thunder was the Thunder really couldn't play Chet with Wemby because the Spurs were very comfortable leaving. Now, that's a center, but still leaving Wembanyama on Hartenstein, who's not a shooter, which meant he was able to roam free and just double and do whatever he needed to do to be impactful defensively. And then it was equally bad when Chet, despite still not being guarded by Wemby at times, was not being aggressive and did not want to shoot. So this is going to be a very important, I think, potentially swing trait of this series is how well and how effective is Josh Hart in this series. In the Knicks game that they blew out the Spurs in March, again, they opened with Wemby guarding Josh Hart. He also guarded a lot of Mo Diawara in that game. Mo Diawara was firmly in the rotation at that point in the season. And those games didn't get broken open really until Hart and Diawara started making shots. And the team got off to kind of a slow start, and they didn't really get out of that slow start until they took Josh out the game. That was kind of one of these weird Josh Hart games where in the first half, he was kind of killing them because he could not shoot. He was having trouble with Wemby's size when he would try to drive and try to get those floaters and those mid-range shots that he is comfortable with. Wemby bothers all of them. He was terrible in the first quarter. They brought in Landry Shamet, and they brought in no, Deuce did not play. So they brought in Landry Shamet. Shamet didn't even shoot the ball that great, but just the threat of him shooting made things easier for the Knicks offensively. And again, once Hart came back in the game, and then Diawara came back in the game, they started making shots. It opened things up, which to me is similar to what you saw with the Cavs. The Cavs wanted to allow Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, their two twin towers in the back in the front line, when they were playing the center, they wanted them to guard Josh Hart and allow them to roam. Josh Hart had the infamous game too, where he started making those threes and really got hot, and he kept shooting well the rest of the way, and it just gave the Cavs no chance. When he started making shots, they couldn't win. And to me, Josh or whoever gets left on Wemby will have to make a few shots to allow the Knicks offense to get some oxygen, to breathe, and to flow the way they want to. If Josh Hart is not making shots or not being effective with his offense in terms of being a scorer, and then they don't find someone else, whether it's a Deuce McBride, I think this could definitely be a Deuce series, or a Landry Shamet, and this could definitely be a Shamet series as well. That is where the Knicks could run into a lot of trouble against this Spurs defense, because again, if Wemby can roam and they have these high-end perimeter defenders, that is where they could cause trouble and cause damage for the Knicks. So that's going to be very important to watch. Also, just a note from watching these games, I think it's important to remember, these were amazing games for Jordan Clarkson in the 2 games he played. He was out of the rotation in March, so he didn't play the March game when they blew him out. But in both the loss that they had and in the game they won in the NBA Cup, especially in the NBA Cup, he was awesome. I mean, these were, I don't know if he's from San Antonio playing against his hometown team. I don't know if that got him more pumped up or whatever, but he was balling in these 2 games. He had a huge performance in the NBA Cup. And the Knicks haven't quite had the Jordan Clarkson offensive explosion yet in one of these games. That's the one thing that's pretty much been missing from the Knicks playoff storyline. I'm not saying they're owed that. It may just never happen. But considering the caliber scorer Jordan Clarkson has been throughout his career, while I think his offensive exploits on the Knicks have been underwhelming, that's fair to say, for the course of the season. He's now turned into defense hustle guy. And credit to him. He's doing a very good job at that. That is not what he was brought here to do. He's brought here to come off the bench and be a secondary scorer, a secondary ball handler, a guy who could create his own offense. And I think a little older, step slower, he just hasn't had that. But credit to him, he's found a role. He's been awesome on the offensive glass. Like, he's been great with, just again hustling after loose balls. He's been really good on the ball, being disruptive. So it's not like he doesn't have a place on the team without his usual offense. But I also would point out that he had his usual offense against this team. Why? I don't know. This is a really good defensive team. They got good defensive players, so it's not like... But some guys they just see certain guys and they know they can score on them. Like, it's what we see with Wembanyama versus Chet, right? Like, Chet is an all-war defender, but Wembanyama feels a certain way about Chet, and he's locked in a certain way. He's very confident in those matchups, and he's very aggressive. That's kind of what you saw from Jordan Clarkson in these matchups against the Spurs. So, just something to file away is, do you get one of these magnet ball games from Jordan Clarkson? And if the Knicks get that game, they will probably win, because that's not something the Spurs can afford to have, I think, given how the Knicks are playing offensively. These other guys are already tough enough. If Jordan Clarkson is making shots and being aggressive, then they're in a lot of trouble in one of these games. I'm not saying he's going to have a huge series or anything like that. I would hope so. I'm not predicting that. But given what I saw in the regular season, it makes me wonder if there isn't 1 or 2 really, really good Jordan Clarkson games in this series. So the other thing I would say as well, in terms of looking at the regular season matchups, I think OG is a problem for them in a very good way for the Knicks, obviously. I think outside of Cat, which is kind of it's a forced mismatch that they're welcoming, right? They're going to, unless Cat, I think, goes crazy or something like that, or for some reason he's dominating one of those smaller guys, I think they're going to live with Cat being guarded by a small. When I say a small, I mean either a wing or a guard. They don't really have a power forward, which is weird about the team. So he's going to be guarded by a small, quote unquote, and that's a matchup they're going to enjoy. In fact, in many ways, I think it's kind of fool's gold to think that Cat's being guarded by a small, let's put him on the block and post him up a ton and see if he can just score a lot. And that's, as we've seen, that's been fool's gold. That doesn't necessarily work. Cat doesn't establish position well enough. He also draws offensive fouls a lot. And for the Spurs, it actually allows Wembanyama to be very disruptive in double teams quite easily with his size and length. So that's not really the answer to the question of what they do when they put a small on Cat. But one of the things I felt like I saw was, outside the Cat mismatch, OG Anunoby seemed like also one of the bigger mismatches that they had in these matchups. It's funny because OG Anunoby's had a phenomenal NBA playoff run. In many ways, it feels like he has gone from super role player to star player in these playoffs. Watching these games was interesting, especially the NBA Cup game, because he actually, in very real ways, resembled his playoff version that we've seen, that we fell in love with for the last 2 months, in at least 2 of these games with the Spurs, than he did the rest of the regular season. In the NBA Cup game that they won, he had 20 points in the first half. He finished with 28 in that game. In the March blowout that they had, of course, that ended up being a runaway. I think he had 13 points, but he was 2 of 5 from 3. He was 5-11 from the field, and he was a plus 16 on the floor. The bench unit was a team that was a number of the guys that really racked up the high plus minuses. I think he was the second highest plus minus of anybody that started. So he was extremely impactful on both sides of the ball in two of the Knicks, both of their wins against the Spurs. The reality is, I think the Spurs, again, because they don't really have a power forward, they don't really have. Kellen Johnson's kind of a combo forward, and he is like deceptively strong. Like, he may not look like, Lou Dort, but he's wiry strong. But they don't really lack. They don't really have an athlete as rangy and athletic and as strong as OG Anunoby, which means that it becomes a favorable matchup for him. So in the one game that they lost, ironically, it was his worst game. Shot 3 for 10. It was a game that Wembanyama guarded him the most, which I think is a thing to file away too. Is there a point in these series where if OG does really get it going, do they abandon the let's put Wemby on Hart or some guy that we're comfortable with the Knicks letting shoot, and let's try to find a way to get Wemby on OG to just take him away? I think if Wemby's guarding OG, he will. I think he will just kind of take him away. But if that's not the case, and I think they're going to try to be disciplined with their strategy, then OG should have a great game. Remember, again, the game the Knicks lost, Hart didn't play. So they couldn't really do the hide Wemby on somebody guy. They had to put him on Cat for a lot of stretches. When they did hide him, they tried to put him on Mo Diawara. It was a weird thing in that game where Mo Diawara in the second half basically only played like 53 seconds and immediately came out. Like, I don't know if you're going to see them do that again. So that's a very important thing, I think, to think about when we talk about this matchup. I think OG, the way he's playing so far and how dominant he's been in the regular season, I think he could be in line for a huge series offensively for the Knicks here. And then the Knicks in the offensive glass, will they be able to dominate this again? This was a main story, in my opinion, in the regular season series. And I think it showed just how vulnerable the Spurs are on the offensive glass, especially given how they're trying to play the Knicks. At least how they did. So in the two games the Knicks won, they had 23 rebounds in the NBA Cup Final. And 18 offensive rebounds. 23 offensive rebounds. 18 offensive rebounds in the March blowout win. They only had 10 in the loss, which is not a terrible number, but that was the game that did not have Mitchell Robinson or Josh Hart. And they were only -1 in offensive rebounds. So it tells you that the Spurs, who are actually a very good defensive rebounding team, they're actually second in the NBA in rebounds, and they're the best in the NBA at defensive rebounding. They had trouble against Knicks on the offensive glass. So with the Spurs looking to hide Wemby on non-shooters, I think it's going to be important for Cat to really dominate the offensive glass. Of course, it's going to be important for Mitch, who had 10 offensive rebounds by himself in the NBA Cup game in I think it was just like 18 minutes or something crazy. And then, of course, OG as well. I think OG is going to have to be a big factor on the offensive glass against smaller matchups that he's going to see. The offensive glass is also going to be important. I think it's going to be important to unlock Cat scoring. We know Cat's going to be guarded by small. I think we'll get to some of the ways Knicks are going to attack the Spurs offensively, but I think you could see a lot of point center Cat as well. It doesn't necessarily mean him shooting a ton or getting a lot of field goal attempts. Our offense ran through him in a scoring manner, but that doesn't mean he can't still find ways to score, and I think one of the ways he's going to have to do that is on the glasses, which is a way he definitely hurt the Spurs in the March blowout. So key things to look at in terms of the Knicks and their ability to win this series. Can they dominate the offensive glass again the way it did in the regular season? That's going to be super important. And then finally, I'm really curious how the Spurs will end up guarding Jalen Brunson. It may sound straightforward, just given kind of how the series went during the regular season, or excuse me, how the Spurs got here, right? Like, they have a obvious pit bull kind of all-world perimeter defender in Stephon Castle, but they didn't play it that straight during the regular season. So, which again was surprising because they didn't have a lot of injuries. There's a lot of variables to deal with in terms of anything involving the front court in talking about this matchup with the Spurs and Knicks. I mentioned Mitch didn't play in the game. I mentioned Hart didn't play in the game. Wemby had a minutes restriction in one of the games. So there's a lot of things that I think are kind of question marks that we're going to have to see what the answers are. The Spurs didn't have a question mark in terms of their backcourt. All their guards were available in all 3 games. But they didn't necessarily, again, just give Brunson one singular matchup. So Castle did get a lot of time with Brunson for sure. But so did De'Aaron Fox, which really surprised me, especially in the March game. In the March game, they tried to put Stephon Castle on Karl-Anthony Towns. And then Wemby guarded Hart, and then Fox was left on Brunson. And to be honest, it kind of worked. In terms of a team defense, like the Knicks got off to a slow start. Hart was missing shots. But it did not really work on Brunson. Like, Brunson scored 11 points in that first quarter. He walked into some easy trade balls. I think he was getting good looks or making good decisions. It's just the offense wasn't operating in the way that it is right now. But he seemed fine with them doing that. Now, overall, Brunson's numbers against the Spurs have kind of been just okay. Like, he didn't have any, like, obviously he scored 60 points against them in 2024, 2025 season. He didn't have one of those, like, vintage explosions against the Spurs this time around. So it suggests that how they've guarded him has been pretty good, even though they lost 2 of the 3 games. And again, it's been a lot of rotations, right? Like, Castle certainly got time, and he will get time here. And I think given how badly the March game went as a whole, I don't know if they want to do the Fox matchup again straight up the way they did in that game in March. So I'll be curious. It also, again, the regular season is where you experiment. And the reality is the Spurs at that point in time may have been looking at the Knicks as a team that they could see in the finals, and maybe they wanted to give a look that was maybe a little unorthodox than what you would expect. Because, again, the most conventional look that we saw in the other series, in other games, was Castle guarding Brunson, Harper guarding Brunson coming off the bench when Fox or Castle came out. And I think that's probably what you'll see more of this series. They put Castle as the primary guy on SGA. I thought he did a really good job. I thought the team as a whole did a really good job. He's an excellent defender. And I think it's going to be a tough task for Brunson. I don't think it's an impossible task. Like, I don't think this is Dyson Daniels level defense. Daniels, and Brunson's given Daniels belt too. But Brunson had some problems with Daniels in that first round series that they had earlier this year. Castle is maybe a little more athletic, but he's not quite as big or as strong as Stephon Castle, or rather, he's bigger and stronger than Stephon Castle. So I think Brunson will have a chance of moving Stephon off of his spot and getting to his spots more comfortably, even though he will have to shoot over a little bit of size, of course, because you got a guy who's 6'6" guarding him. So I don't know. I'm very curious how they guard Brunson, because that was something that was a little bit more. I didn't expect it to be as much of a question mark when I watched the games, but then I watched the games, I'm like, wait, Stephon Castle is not taking Brunson. That's weird. And especially in the last game they played, which was the March game, the primary matchup was Fox. And I thought Brunson was very fine with that. I don't think they want to try that again, but they may. You never know. We'll see what ends up happening. I also wouldn't be surprised if they try more Vassell than Fox, because the other thing about Fox as well, you got to remember, he is battling an ankle injury. I don't know how well he's feeling now, but he hurt his ankle against Minnesota. He re-injured that ankle in the series against OKC, where he missed the first 2 games, came back, got hurt in the series, finished the series, but really wasn't himself throughout the entire series. I don't know how much they want him chasing around Jalen Brunson. So I would be surprised if they go back to that Fox matchup. The other thing about Brunson's matchup going up against this team that I think is interesting to watch is I'm also fascinated in how Brunson looks attacking this Spurs defense with the Knicks' new offense. So it was kind of funny to watch. Ball movement in these games were pretty good. The Knicks were very comfortable offensively in all these games. But it's still not exactly the same in how they play. They're running a different offense right now. Clearly, there was not point center cat in these games. Brunson's playing way more off the ball. And I think given the Spurs' propensity to want to apply full court pressure because they have such good perimeter defenders in Harper and in Castle, I actually think it's more advantageous to the Knicks that they're playing Brunson more off the ball. And they're going to have to be very comfortable with doing that a lot more in this series as well, so that Brunson doesn't get worn down offensively, having to dribble through very difficult pressure 94 feet every single time down the floor. I think, to me, Mike Brown has also been very willing to play 2 guards against the Spurs. That's one thing I saw in all 3 matchups. That was one of the most consistent things I saw in all 3 matchups, regardless of the series or who was playing or who was hurt, was that they were playing 3 guards. In fact, they actually ended up, or rather, 2 point guards at the same time. In fact, they actually ended up switching the guards. The first 2 games, it was Tyler Kolek in the backcourt with Jalen Brunson. when they went on that big run in the fourth quarter in the NBA Cup final, you'll remember it was Tyler Kolek who made big plays, made big shots, and he was crucial in that game. That was outside of the Christmas game where they came back from Cleveland. That was the Tyler Kolek game of the season, probably, was the NBA Cup final. And Jose Alvarado, when he was traded to New York and then entered the rotation over Tyler Kolek in the March game that the Knicks won by 20-plus points, he was also playing alongside Jalen Brunson. That was very early on. That may have been his second or third game with the Knicks. It was shortly after the All-Star break. So I think in this series, Alvarado playing with Brunson, I think is going to be something that the Knicks should be looking at in this series. I also think more point forward duties for Cat and Hart, I think, are also going to be very important in this series, because if they're going to hide Wembanyama on Hart especially, it may be best for Hart to just orchestrate the offense as opposed to him having to be someone who is being forced to be a shooter or forced to be a scorer. Like, maybe let him run the offense, because Wembanyama is not going to apply the kind of ball pressure that the guards would. So it should allow the Knicks to get into their offense a little easier. And, of course, Cat in the point center stuff. Very fascinating how it looks against the Spurs. Notably against the Cavs, they did a much better job, I think, guarding that stuff than the Knicks, certainly the Hawks did and the Sixers did, because they had a elite, long, off-ball guy roaming around and trying to blow off those actions in Evan Mobley. I don't need to tell you how great Victor Wembanyama is and how he's even a better defender than Evan Mobley. So that will be something to watch in terms of how effective that stuff will be. But I think just given the matchup and how things are going to go in this series and how important it will be for Brunson not end up having the ball get sticky in his hands and him pound the ball into oblivion, it's going to be important for the Knicks to allow other guys to orchestrate the offense. And that's going to include, I think at times, using other point guards to help with the series. So it's a very fascinating series to follow. There are a lot of different X factors here, man. I can't wait to see how the series shakes out. But I think it's prediction time. And when I look at this series, the Spurs are a great team. And they are, again, like I said earlier, worthy challengers. But as I said all year, I said the Knicks got an opportunity to play anyone in the 7-game series outside of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I would like their chances to win. That included everybody in the Western Conference outside of Oklahoma City Thunder. The road to get to the NBA playoffs was rocky, and the road to start the NBA playoffs was rocky. But I never wavered in the belief that, especially in the East, that the Knicks were the best team suited to win 7-game series against pretty much everybody in the NBA, given their potential. They easily dispatched those teams in the East. Now they have a non-Oklahoma City Thunder team in the West in the NBA Finals, which is what I said they needed to win an NBA championship. I've been burned saying this before, but I will say this again. I think this will be a more competitive series than the series the Knicks played in the previous 3 rounds. Now, I said that against Philly. That ended up being a cakewalk. I said that against Cleveland. That ended up being a cakewalk. So maybe I'll be wrong again, but I do think this will be a more competitive series. But I think the Knicks are playing the best basketball right now, which I think is most important. Which is why I am picking the New York Knicks to win the NBA championship in 6 games. I think that deserves a round of applause. So we'll get there. I'm picking the Knicks to win in 6, and here are the reasons why. Number 1, I think the Knicks employ more scoring threats than anyone San Antonio has faced in the playoffs so far. That includes Oklahoma City, given the version we saw of Oklahoma City. Because the version we saw of Oklahoma City did not have Jalen Williams, and for a long stretch of the series did not have EJ Mitchell. And you could effectively say they kind of didn't have Chet Holmgren, who just had an all-time disappearing act in this playoff series, especially in Game 7. And then when you watch the Thunder, and this is what we talked about when I was talking about the series, I don't know if I actually did it on Orange Blue Bloods. I did it on 40 Days and Counting, my other podcast and my live stream show I do every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Tuesday 6 p.m. Friday 8 a.m. I said the Thunder were struggling offensively. It was very clear. Like, they were winning some games, and when they got these great games from Jared McCain and Alex Caruso was shooting out of his mind. The offense looked okay, but I think this is like not healthy. This is not what's gonna get them past the Spurs, which is why I kind of flipped mid-series. I think the Spurs are actually gonna win this. I picked them to win Game 7, and Game 7 kind of went exactly how I thought it would go. Shea was awesome. No one else really showed up, and the Spurs, I think, took advantage of the fact that they were really able to lock in on SGA and SGA only. The Spurs played outstanding defense in that series. But again, I think this will be the best offensive team the Spurs have played so far in the postseason. Offensively, when you think about the regular season matchups, the Knicks had their way in all 3 games. This is a great elite defense. They did not look like a great elite defense against the Knicks, rather. I'm sorry. So much so that in watching these games, I actually forgot to look back that the Spurs actually went to zone. Like, they got so out of their comfort zone, finding ways to get stops defensively, that they actually end up going to a lot of zone to try to junk up the game and junk up the Knicks offense. It definitely worked a little bit in the second game that the Knicks played against them, that they lost. When they got down in the third game the Knicks played, they went to it again, but the difference was they started getting 3 balls from Landry Shamet and 3 balls from other guys, and Dewar hit a bunch of threes. So to me, that showed me, okay, there is a problem for the Spurs in terms of this defensive matchup, that they actually had some trouble with the Knicks offense. The Knicks are an elite offensive team. All the metrics show you that, and for some reason, I think it doesn't really matter what other people think, but for some reason, they don't get given that respect. Maybe because for so much of the season, it didn't look all that pretty. It was so much Jalen Brunson isolation. Despite that, they still were one of the elite offenses in the regular season, and they've been supercharged now that they've gone away from a lot of the Jalen Brunson isolation stuff in the postseason. So I think that this is a good team to try to attack this Spurs defense. I also think the way the Knicks are playing is going to provide more challenge in OKC as well. Because if you watch those games against the Thunder for the Spurs, OKC seemed very resigned with allowing SGA to play 1 versus 3 plus an alien who's 7'4". They don't do a lot of off-ball actions. There were a lot of guys kind of just standing around. And it was a lot of, all right, set the screen for SGA or get him in isolation. Everybody just spread out and be ready to shoot. Some guys that, quite frankly, weren't reliable shooters or didn't want to shoot, like Chet Holmgren. The Knicks, as we've seen, are running a much more complex offense, and they're running a lot more physical sets, which is ironic because Mike Brown actually didn't want to really call plays and run so much actual offense. But it's part of that is because the Knicks have actually reached that flow state that they've been talking about trying to get to offensively, where they kind of know exactly what to do in every stretch. So it may look like they're running a very regimented offense. But also because I just think that they're not allowing guys to stand around. I mean, how many times has Mikal Bridges, who was huge pretty much since the early mishaps he had in this postseason, who has been huge all playoffs, how many times have you seen him being effective as a cutter? How effective have you seen OG Anunoby cut into the basket? Landry Shamet off the ball, moving around to get 3 balls. Like, they're just not standing around. And it makes it a little harder for Wemby. It makes it a little harder for the Spurs to say, hey, let's lock in on Brunson. Let's zone up and load up and be ready for when he tries to attack and to help out when other guys are not standing still. So I think that's something that's going to be an advantage for the Knicks that the Spurs really haven't seen. Because if you think about the matchups against also the Blazers, they don't have the offensive firepower that the Knicks have. And one of the weaknesses of the T-Wolves is that they don't run great offense. It is a lot of Anthony Edwards standing and guys standing around. And, there's a lot of Jaden McDaniels and, Terrence Chandler trying to get downhill, one-on-one matchups or in handoffs and things like that. They don't run a very free-flowing offense. It's one of the weaknesses of the T-Wolves. That is not a weakness of the Knicks. So I like this matchup for the Knicks in terms of their ability to attack the Spurs defense. I also think at a certain point, experience is going to matter. The Spurs just beat the defending champs. I don't want to minimize that accomplishment at all or take them lightly that they did that. But I do think you have to take into account just how beaten up OKC was by the end of that series. And when I looked at the games that the Spurs lost, I thought that their immaturity lost them games 3 and game 5. And I think that is something that the Knicks will be able to do a better job exploiting because they'll just have better able-bodied players than the OKC Thunder had in that series they played in the Western Conference Finals. When also I think about experience, listen, for the Spurs' sake, let's hope Stephon Castle doesn't have to play a lot of point guard. Castle is talented, and he brings a lot to the table. I think his decision-making and care for the ball are not two of his strengths. He was a turnover machine in a lot of that series, and to me, it's sometimes I like to try to view games from like the other, like if I was rooting for the other team, to kind of give me a sense of security of what I should be looking for the Knicks and where they can take advantage. So especially during the Game 7, I'm really watching both of these teams, but in some ways I was trying to watch the Spurs, especially when it looked like the Spurs were about to win. As a Spurs fan, how do I feel about what we're doing? And I said this on social media. He would scare me. Stephon Castle would scare the hell out of me if he had to have the ball in his hands in a serious situation or for any extended amount of time, especially given the health scares they've had with De'Aaron Fox. Fox hasn't played great, but he's at least much more reliable with the ball, where he's not going to turn the ball over as much. And the Knicks have been a team that has been way more disruptive defensively in this playoffs than they were in the regular season. They're not Oklahoma City defensively because no one is. But I think with Josh Hart, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mikal Bridges, the amount of deflections that they're generating right now, I would worry a little bit about how the Spurs find a way to keep their nerves in what is going to be a massive stage on the NBA Finals. And the other thing I have to ask as well is, will Wemby have enough around him to lift them to a championship? With the chips all on the table, Wemby is an incredible player. He's a generational talent. Is he ready for a championship moment at just 22 years old? Because when I think about the history of this league, ironically, 3 of the 6 youngest NBA Finals MVPs in NBA history all were Spurs, which is a great omen for the Spurs. Because you had Kawhi in 2014, you had Duncan in 99, and you had Tony Parker in 07. Kawhi was 22, Duncan was 22, Parker was 24. Again, Wemby is 22. The difference, though, with this Spurs team compared to those Spurs Finals MVPs and those teams was those young stars were buoyed by other stars who were far more experienced. In 14, Kawhi had Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, each who had already won, 4 titles? Or Duncan won 4, Parker won 3, and Manu Ginobili. In 99, Duncan had, of course, David Robinson. No champions in terms of, they had Mario Elie, but no, champions in terms of the stars. But he did have David Robinson, an all-star center, still at the end of his prime, but still really good. And in 07, Parker, of course, had Tim Duncan, who at that time had already won 2 championships. And Parker himself had actually already won 2 titles. So he wasn't an inexperienced guy coming into the NBA Finals himself, even though he was only 24 years old. This is very different than what Wembanyama is dealing with. Wembanyama, now you could argue he may be more special and generational than all those guys, and that's saying a lot because Kawhi Leonard and Tim Duncan's in that list, but that is real. That's how great he is. But it's much different than how it was for those other guys because who is this other experienced star that's going to help Wembanyama get through this thing? Is it Fox? Again, how healthy is he? He's definitely never been in an NBA Finals stage before. This is the deepest he's ever been in the playoffs. He's an older player, not an old player, but an older player that's just a really young team. Is he the guy that, allows the young buck to feel comfortable in this NBA Finals stage because he's got a wingman that is already ready to go and primed for this moment? Is it Harrison Barnes come off the bench? I mean, they don't have that guy really. He's not who I see. So it's going to be a lot on Wembanyama to really be special, and he very well could be. I just think given history, guys who have won NBA Finals MVPs have had that guy. The only guy who hasn't, and he had him for 6 games, was Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson had Kareem for 6 games, or 5 games rather. Then he won Game 6 by himself, more or less. Obviously, he won Finals MVP. But Kareem, we forget. And those who watch Winning Time will now know because they did a really good job from dramatizing that whole series. Kareem was unstoppable, basically, for the first 5 games and probably should have won Finals MVP. But besides Magic, there really isn't an example of like these guys who like, oh, I'm young, but it's okay because I got this by myself. Magic also, by the way, is on that list twice. And the second time, of course, he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar again. So experience is a big deal. And look, the Knicks don't have a bunch of guys who have won NBA championships, obviously, but they do have a team that's been together for a couple years now. Guys who have had all various types of NBA playoff experience, and a team that has been priming itself for this moment. The Spurs were not. The Spurs are a year ahead, maybe even 2 years ahead. The Spurs, their goal, as they've said, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Darren Fox or somebody. One of them said, "Yeah, man, our goal is to make the playoffs." But then we saw how good we were. Like, hey, why not? Like that. Their goal was like, oh, let's be ready for the playoffs. Let's be good for the playoffs. Like they weren't championship or bust. And maybe that helps with maybe the pressure of the moment. But now that the moment is here, that does create a different environment for the Spurs. And I think it's going to be important to watch in this series. Other kind of technical things is I just think the Knicks also are an awesome road team. And not having home court advantage may actually be a little blessing in disguise, as crazy as that may be. One of the hidden things about this group that I think doesn't get talked about enough is, and what makes me feel very confident in picking the Knicks to win this series, despite them not having home court advantage, is just how good they are on the road. And I think they will have their opportunity to win at least one, if not two games on the road in this series. Over the past 2 seasons, we've seen this group win extremely tough games on the road in extremely hostile environments. They've won in Detroit, they've won in Boston, and they've won in Indiana. We've also seen this Knicks fan contingent that is another variable of this series that hasn't quite, or rather the playoffs, that hasn't quite reared its ugly head in this series yet. Though I did see an interesting story about how some Spurs ticket holders, season ticket holders are being, basically removed off their rolls for next year and for the future because they are selling their tickets online for exorbitant numbers. Are those numbers all Knicks fans? I don't think so, but I just don't know. And like I said, after the Knicks, won the series in Cleveland, I'm just not going to put anything past Knicks fans in terms of how well they will travel. I think this will probably be the least New York contingent of any of the series that the Knicks have played so far this postseason, where in all 3 series, the Knicks fans have made their presence felt. But who's to say that's not a factor in this? And even if it's not, like I said before, the Knicks, just in general, have just been a better road team during the postseason in this Jalen Brunson era than they have been a home team. And I think the team just plays with a different energy on the road. I think that in many ways, a lot of like the lights, camera, action, bells and whistles and pressure and everything that comes with like the Knicks having success in the regular season and then playing games at home, I think not having that for to start the series is great. Because you just came off a layoff. And we saw how much they kind of struggled to get their legs under them in the Cleveland series in Game 1. Nothing punched you in the face in terms of you're in the NBA Finals playing against a good team and this is for all the marbles. So get your act together faster than a road environment, a hostile environment potentially, and a team as good as the Spurs. So I think that them actually starting this on the road is probably better for them. They have to get on a plane. There's all this preparation. You now know there is no, I'm in the NBA Eastern Conference Final. Oh, I got to get going. Like, man, it took me a while to kind of get my legs under me and get going. You're not going to have that playing in San Antonio where they yelling, "Go, Spurs, go," every 5 seconds. And there's a crazy crowd. I think it will be very good for this team actually to be on the road. And I think if you're a team playing the Knicks, you're like, oh, okay, we got them on the road. Okay, that's good. We're going home. Again, that's a false sense of security. I think Philly felt that way. I think Cleveland felt that way, and they were in for rude awakenings because, again, the version of Knicks that plays on the road is just a better team than the version that plays at home. Look at the point differentials in the last 2 years between how they play on the road and how they play at home in the postseason. It's a distinct advantage for the Knicks to actually play on the road. So, in terms of why I think the Knicks can win this series, despite being a team that doesn't have home court advantage, them being an awesome road team in the playoffs is certainly a huge, huge factor in this. And the last thing I'll say as well, and I think it's important to talk about in any NBA finals for sure, is execution down the stretch. It kind of goes back a little bit to experience, but I'm going to take experience away from that and just talk about the actual players. I think in the playoffs, the team that has the best closer will always have a distinct advantage in the series, and especially late in games, and especially in the NBA Finals where you expect the game to be close. Brunson, of course, is Captain Clutch, and I think every Knicks fan feels extremely comfortable with the game on the line and the ball being in Jalen Brunson's hands. Now, Wemby put on a performance for the ages in Game 1, and you want to talk about crunch time performance and big shot making. He showed he can definitely do it, obviously, because of what he did in Game 1 against OKC. But overall, and including what we saw in Game 7, that was a close game that the Spurs did close out. Overall, though, that team is still, I think, and it's the nature of your best player being 7'4", it's still more of a committee team down the stretch than it is the Knicks. The Knicks, we know, it's Brunson time. With the Spurs, and if it's not Brunson, the only reason it won't be Brunson time is because the team is going to send 2 guys at him, and therefore someone else is going to have to make a play. But Brunson is going to be the guy making the decisions. With the Spurs, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, it's Fox. It could be a lot of Stephen Castle, which, again, that would scare me if I'm the Spurs. And Wemby, of course, will have his opportunities and stuff, but you have to find a way to get him the ball in those stretches as opposed to a guard who can just dominate the game down the stretch. At the end of the day, I trust Brunson more than any of the Spurs ball handlers, especially in an NBA final setting. And I think the Knicks, when we get to crunch time and trying to take away Wembanyama, I trust their abilities to use their physicality and deny and frustrate him and not allow him to be the kind of impact player he has been in crunch time for the Spurs throughout this postseason run. This is the biggest Knicks series in definitely at least almost 3 decades, obviously. I would argue that this is even bigger than 99 because I lived in 99 and I was a kid, but I was fully locked in. I always say there's various origin stories of when EJ really became a huge basketball fan, but the origin, you want to talk about when I was really locked in? I always say 98 NBA All-Star games when I really was like, wow, this is something that I'm going to be locked into loving forever. And so far, so good. But you want to talk about, okay, the one moment that really keeps you locked into this thing, even as a kid and beyond, it was the 99 finals, of course, the 99 playoff run for the Knicks. Because I was too young for 94. And I was 99, I'm 8 years old, but I knew, and everybody in New York knew at that time, as great as they were playing, and you hoped that they could win, you knew with no Patrick Ewing, that it was going to be an extremely tall task to beat the Spurs, who were mauling people in the playoffs. They just swept in the Western Conference Finals against a very good Blazers team that then went back to the Western Conference Finals the next year. So you knew that this was going to be a tall task for the Knicks in 99, and it was going to be basically a miracle if they found a way to beat the Twin Towers and Duncan and Robinson. So the Knicks played the finals. They kind of got their ass kicked, and you kind of knew what it was. You say, hey, listen, though, this is a great run. This is a lot of fun, and man, what a season. This just isn't that to me. That's why I say this series is bigger than 99, because 99, I think we knew what was likely going to happen. This feels more like 94 in the sense that this feels like your absolute best shot with a nucleus that's been together for a while to win a championship. There's a big African descent center on the other side that will make this extremely difficult, and it's not going to be easy, but the opportunity is certainly there. The matchup is certainly there, and how the team is playing, it gives them all the opportunities to try to find a way to win this thing. Their health is pretty good outside of Mitchell Robinson. They're playing against a team they had success against in the regular season. As Aaron Boone likes to say, everything is right in front of them. I hope they live up to the moment. I firmly believe that they will. I do. I think this is, again, what this team has been building towards. This is what they've been working towards. And they're on such a high right now. And they're playing so well. I know Vegas has the Spurs as a pretty considerable favorite. Vegas is not dummies. So I take that very seriously. It makes me kind of wonder, man, am I not seeing something about this series? Despite having watched all these 3 games or whatever. And I watched all of the Western Conference Finals, and I feel like the Knicks are a better team than the Spurs. But I just think that with everything that they have going for them right now, I don't think that the pressure is really going to get to them. You know, that's the thing about the NBA Finals, man. There's variables you don't know, and we're gonna see it. Somebody that I spoke about today, There's going to be two people, and maybe even more than two people, but at least two people. Somebody I spoke about today that I said could play well, or has been a star, or has been great for the Spurs or the Knicks, because on either side, one of them is going to play terrible. Because the NBA Finals, the pressure at its highest, and they're not going to live up to the moment. And somebody I spoke about as well, whether I said they were going to play well or play poorly, it doesn't matter what I said about them. Or maybe it's someone I didn't even mention, though I think I almost got to everybody that plays in the rotation for both teams. I don't think I missed anybody. I didn't mention Carter Bryant. Maybe it's Carter Bryant. I don't know. I doubt it, but somebody is going to play out of their mind or have a massive, massive impact in this series and lead their team to help lead their team to a championship. Who those people are, I gave you my guesses as to who I think they will be, but it could be anybody because it's the NBA Finals, which is what makes this so compelling, which makes it so interesting, and what makes it fun? Question mark. It feels fun a little bit prior to talking about the games. It won't feel quite as fun as a fan and someone who is rooting for either team, but especially, of course, on this side, rooting for the Knicks. It won't be maybe quite fun watching these games because how nerve-wracking it is, and you're like, why isn't X playing way better than we thought he should be playing? Why is that guy on that other side doing all of this? Like, it's the nature of the NBA playoffs, and it's definitely the nature of the NBA Finals. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen. But I feel better about more of the Knicks guys doing what they need to do and doing their job to live up to this moment than I do about the Spurs. I think the Spurs will have more guys who will be like, oh, we thought that guy's going to play well. He ended up being terrible. That's how I feel. That's the vibe I get. And again, it's informed by also what I saw in the regular season. It felt like the Knicks, I always like to see, does my team look comfortable executing, especially offensively? Because defensively, you can try different things. You could double. You can. There's a lot of things you do defensively. Offensively, ironically, the Knicks did change their offense. But it's kind of hard to change your offense on the fly. There's only so many things you can do. Your team is your team. Or like beg guys to make shots. They're not good shooters, or they're missing shots, or they're just missing shots. I just feel like offensively, they just looked really comfortable against this team. And I like when my team, and I'm picking a series, I'm looking at a series, that my team looks comfortable doing what they do well. And they've already actually changed their identity to something different that the Spurs are going to have to adjust to. I think we're going to see something special. And when that magic moment happens and the confetti's coming down, whether it's in San Antonio or New York, in this case, I have it finishing in New York, and the Knicks are NBA champions, what this will do for New York City, what this will do for the Knicks community, which I told you got me emotional seeing their celebration at the Eastern Conference Finals. It's going to be unreal. It's going to be unreal. It's something that a lot of Knicks fans have prayed for. A lot of Knicks fans have dreamed of. I know I've certainly dreamed for. And we're told, and maybe some of them felt themselves, would never happen. In fact, some fans, and screw them, let's say kind of jokingly, but they defected. They literally were like, this is never going to work for me. I'm leaving. I'm going to join it. I'm going to be a Nets fan or be a Lakers fan or be whatever. Like, if they can do what I think they're going to do, just what a moment that would be. And which is why this finals is so monumental and why it's such a huge finals, not just for the Knicks community, not just for New York City, but for the NBA. This is a monumental series. The next guy, who maybe already is the guy because we've seen what he's done through this postseason and through this regular season and Victor Wembanyama, the prince that was promised, versus everything that comes with the Knicks franchise, the team they've built, the history, the drought, everything. Can't ask for a better matchup than this, and I can't wait. That's a good place to leave, man. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods, our NBA Finals preview. I hope we gave you guys as comprehensive a preview as I could. I really wanted to. Not that I always put great effort in all shows, of course. But this is obviously a very important episode and an important show. And I wanted to make sure anybody listening to the show that wanted to learn about these teams, their matchups against each other, learn about the Spurs particularly, because you may not have obviously watched 82 plus games of the Spurs this year, that you know what the Knicks are up against in a reasonable way, not in a orange and blue colored, rose colored glasses way, in a real way. A real threat, a real great team, but one I think the Knicks will beat, and one that I think the Knicks will handle. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, if you enjoy Orange and Blue Bloods, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Again, search Orange and Blue Bloods wherever you get your podcast to find these episodes. When you get there and you find the channel, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the auto download feature. And, of course, be sure to give us a 5-star review. All of those things are very important to the channel. All those things are very important to the show. So if you can do that, we greatly appreciate it. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. If you want to watch these videos, all episodes of Orange and Blue Bloods goes up on the New Generation Media YouTube channel. Again, NU Generation Media. While you're there, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel and like this video. And give me your prediction. Knicks, Spurs, who wins, how many games, and why. I want to know your prediction. I want to know what you guys say. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will be responding in the comments. So, again, give me your pick. Who wins? Knicks, Spurs. Hit me up on social media, by the way, too. If you're listening to the podcast, obviously there's not really a comment section. I think there's a comment section on Spotify. I don't really read those, if they even are comments. But if you are listening, you can also hit me up, obviously. You can also find me on social media. Hit me up and give me your prediction, Knicks Spurs, and tell me why, who wins, and how many games. X, you can find me, EJ_Stewart, Instagram and TikTok, Action EJ. And, of course, search me on Buzzer. BZZR is the app. And it's a sports-only mobile content space. Be sure to find me on there. You can search my name, EJ Stewart, or search EJ205 Prep. That's going to do it for now, man. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out Orange and Blue Bloods. Game 1 tips off Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Knicks at Spurs. Sounds kind of surreal to say still. Even though we've known this reality for, well, obviously, the Knicks being in the finals for a while. But now we have a matchup. We know where they're going, time, everything. Still feels surreal to say, but they've earned it. And you've earned it, Knicks fans, for being so loyal for so long. Enjoy the NBA Finals. We'll have plenty of special episodes throughout the NBA Finals, so keep it locked here. I'm EJ Stewart. Enjoy the rest of your week. And, of course, let's go Knicks.